Welcome back to the deep dive. It is January 27th, 2026. And if you've been scrolling through the tech headlines this morning, you're probably, seeing the usual stuff.
The usual suspects.
Exactly. New chips from Silicon Valley, maybe a regulatory battle in Brussels, another massive model release out of Shenzhen. But if that's all you're looking at, you are missing a massive shift.
It's a classic case of looking where the light is,
Yeah.
right? Rather than where the action is actually happening.
People keep talking about this AI divide, and usually that's just a euphemism for who is getting left behind. It's a depressing conversation.
It is.
But today, we are flipping that script. We're zooming in on a region that looked at that divide, analyzed it, and just decided to build a bridge right over it.
We are looking squarely at the Southern African Development Community, or SADC. And honestly, the date today is important. We are right in the middle of what analysts are calling a transformative epoch for this region.
Transformative epoch. I love that. It sounds like something you'd read in a history book 50 years from now.
Yeah.
It has some weight to it.
It should. Because the mindset shift here is just radical. I mean, if you rewind just 5 or 6 years, digital innovation in Southern Africa was viewed as a peripheral luxury.
And nice to have.
Exactly, the cherry on top. But as of 2026, that view is dead. Digital innovation is now a core pillar of macroeconomic stability. It's not about gadgets anymore. It's about whether your economy is actually going to be standing in 10 years.
So our mission today is to unpack exactly how this is happening. And we aren't just speculating. We are digging into a serious stack of sources.
A big stack.
We've got the report on SADC adoption of AI trends and analysis. We've got data from the African Union, the SADC Digital Transformation Strategy, and some really dense but fascinating reports from the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Sustainable Development, CAISD.
In all these documents, they're really trying to answer one massive high-stakes question.
Which is?
The question is simply this: can Southern Africa transition from being a model taker to a model maker?
I want to pause on those terms because they frame everything we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
Model taker versus model maker.
Right. So a model taker is a consumer. It means you import ChatGPT, you import the algorithms, you pay the licensing fees to U.S. or Chinese companies. You're a customer.
You use their tool.
You use their tools. A model maker, on the other hand, is an architect. It means you are building the technology to fit your own context, owning the IP, controlling the output.
So the stakes are basically, do you want to be a digital tenant paying rent forever, or do you want to own the building?
That's a perfect analogy. And if Southern Africa can't make that leap to model maker, they risk being left behind by the Fourth Industrial Revolution entirely. They just become a market for other people's products.
Instead of a producer of their own value.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's look at the strategy. How do you actually make that shift? Because usually when we talk about these multinational government strategies, it's a lot of meetings, not a lot of action. But this feels different. The sources talk about a continental compass.
This is the efficiency play.
Yeah.
And it's smart. Think about the European Union. Member states don't write every single regulation from scratch. They harmonize.
Right.
SADC is doing the same thing. They aren't trying to invent AI policy in a vacuum. They are using blueprints provided by the African Union, specifically the AU Continental AI Strategy, and a framework called SADC 2034.
SADC 2034 sounds like a sci-fi weapon.
It does. It stands for the Science, Technology, and Innovation Strategy for Africa. It's the long-term roadmap. And by using these frameworks, a country like Lesotho or Malawi, which might not have a massive team of tech regulators,
You can just adopt best practices.
immediately. They don't have to spend 3 years drafting a bill. They take the blueprint, they adapt it, and they move.
So speed is the name of the game. Don't reinvent the wheel, just put it on the car.
Right.
But here is where it gets really interesting for me on the technical side. I was reading through the Witzmine Institute reports, and I kept seeing this term, vertical AI.
Yes. This is crucial. This is the whole game.
Yeah. We're so used to general AI, the big LLMs that try to do everything. Write a poem, code in Python, plan your vacation.
Be everything to everyone.
Right. But the strategy here isn't general, it's vertical. Why is that distinction so important?
Because general AI is incredibly resource heavy. It's inefficient. Southern African nations are realizing they don't need a chatbot that can discuss French existentialism.
No.
They need tools that work within their specific local constraints to solve very specific problems. Vertical AI is narrow and deep. It's a tool designed to do one thing perfectly, like diagnosing a specific crop disease or managing a local power grid, and to do it with very little computing power.
So instead of a Swiss Army knife that's just okay at everything, they're building a laser scalpel that's perfect for one thing.
And this is the key, a laser scalpel that runs on a battery pack, not a nuclear power plant. It's optimization for the environment.
This has to tie into a concept that kept popping up in the reading, digital colonialism. Now that sounds like a buzzword, but the economic argument behind it is pretty terrifying.
It's a very real economic mechanism. I mean, think about the flow of value in the current AI ecosystem. If an African nation just uses Western AI, what happens?
Oh, right.
They feed their local data into the model. That data trains the model, making the Western tech company smarter and more valuable. Then, the African nation pays a subscription fee to access that intelligence.
You're exporting your raw materials, your data for free, and then buying back the finished product at a premium.
Precisely. It mirrors the old colonial extraction models. You dig up the diamonds, ship them out, and buy back the engagement ring. It's the same pattern.
So how do they stop it?
They're leaning heavily on something called the Malabo Convention to ensure data sovereignty.
Meaning African data is governed by African laws.
And hosted on infrastructure they control. If you don't own the data, you don't own the intelligence that comes from it. It is that simple.
Okay, so that's the theory. Vertical AI, data sovereignty, shared blueprints. But I want to look at the map. Who is actually building this? The report breaks the region down into pioneers and active drafters. Let's start with the heavy hitter.
We have to start with South Africa. They are the pioneer nation and the undeniable hub of this whole thing.
I saw the stats on this. South Africa hosted the continent's first AI factory back in 2025. And the hardware specs they're impressive. Over 3,000 GPUs. For anyone who's not a tech person, put that in perspective. Is that a lot?
It's significant. I mean, it's not going to rival the biggest private cluster at a place like Meta or Google, but for a regional government-backed facility, it's massive. That is enough compute to do serious heavy lifting science.
Like what?
We're talking genomic sequencing, complex climate modeling, or training those deep vertical AI models we just talked about.
And the cool part is that it's not just for South Africa, is it?
No, and that's the SADC spirit coming into play. It's a shared regional asset. So if you're a researcher in Zimbabwe or Eswatini, and you have a brilliant idea, but your university doesn't have a supercomputer,
You can tap into the factory.
you can tap in. It just lowers the barrier to entry for the whole neighborhood.
So South Africa provides the muscle, but then you have Mauritius. They're ranked number 2 in readiness, which is wild for such a small island nation.
Mauritius is playing a very, very smart game. They know they can't compete on raw industrial scale, so they are positioning themselves as a watchtower.
A watchtower? What do you mean?
Well, think about their geography. They are surrounded by the Indian Ocean, so they're pivoting entirely to the blue economy. And they have deployed these automated maritime surveillance systems.
That sounds like a classic vertical AI application.
It is. It uses satellite data, automated pattern recognition, and it tracks ship movements in real time. It's looking for anomalies.
So ships that turn off their transponders or are moving in patterns that suggest illegal fishing.
Exactly that. And illegal fishing costs these economies billions. So it's using AI to protect a natural resource. It's high-tech environmental protection that literally pays for itself.
Then you move to the mainland, Namibia and Botswana. Now, these are economies that have traditionally relied on digging things out of the ground, diamonds, uranium.
Right, mineral extraction.
But the sources say they are pivoting.
They are active drafters. They're writing strategies to diversify away from simple extraction. But interestingly, they are using AI to make the extraction they do have much more efficient. They're using precision mining.
But there was a mention of green hydrogen there, too. That seems to be the buzzword of the decade.
It is, especially in Namibia.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about green hydrogen. It's incredibly complex to produce. It requires massive amounts of water for electrolysis, massive amounts of renewable energy.
Okay.
So Namibia is using AI management systems to optimize the water desalination process needed to even support the hydrogen industry in the first place.
So the AI is balancing the water needs, the energy output, and the hydrogen production all at once.
Correct. It's this complex feedback loop that humans just can't manage in real time. You need AI to balance the grid.
It really seems like everyone has picked a lane, but you can't have lanes if you don't have roads. Which brings us to connectivity.
Yeah, the plumbing.
The SADC Digital Transformation Strategy has a target for 2030 about Internet Exchange Points, or IXPs. They want 80% of data traffic to be routed regionally. Why does that specific percentage matter so much?
This is the invisible part of the internet that most people never think about.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, if you are in Luanda and you send an email to a colleague in Kinshasa, there is a very good chance that data packet travels all the way up to a server in London or Marseille
Wow.
and then comes all the way back down to Africa.
That sounds incredibly inefficient.
It is. It's inefficient, it's slow, that's latency, and it's expensive because
Ah.
you are paying for international transit. Routing 80% of traffic through regional IXPs means you keep the data in the neighborhood.
Faster, cheaper, more secure.
Exactly. It doesn't leave the legal jurisdiction.
Okay, so keep the traffic local, that's the plan. But we have to address the elephant in the room, or maybe the rhinoceros in the room.
Oh.
The constraints. Because you can have all the 3,000 GPU factories you want, but if the grid crashes, they're just expensive paperweights.
The power gap. This is the single biggest hurdle. Southern Africa has a well-known energy deficit. You cannot just plug a 10-megawatt data center into the national grid in some of these countries. You'd cause a blackout.
So what are they doing? Because the sources mention a workaround in the DRC and Zambia. That sounds pretty clever.
They call it green power for compute. So, instead of relying on the shaky public grid, they are co-locating the AI infrastructure directly with hydroelectric projects.
You mean like physically plugging the data center into the dam?
Essentially, yes.
Mm.
It's a direct feed. This ensures sustainable 247 power that completely bypasses the instability of the national distribution network. It turns a natural resource advantage hydro into a digital advantage.
Innovation through constraint. I love that. But then you have the other gap, connectivity for the actual user.
Right.
We talked about high-tech mining and government clouds, but what about the person in a rural village? If you don't have 5G, is AI just useless for you?
This is where we circle back to that vertical AI concept. The solution is Edge AI, and the report highlights Tanzania's work here.
Edge AI. It sounds like a sci-fi movie title.
It's actually very practical.
Yeah.
The cloud is centralized processing, right? Servers far away. The edge is processing right where the data is collected, on your phone, on a sensor, on a tablet.
Okay.
So Tanzania is piloting diagnostic tools for rural health clinics that run entirely on the device.
So a nurse in a remote village takes a picture of a blood sample.
And the phone analyzes it right there. No internet connection required. The AI model is small enough to live on a hardware. It just democratizes access to advanced diagnostics without needing fiber optic cables in the jungle.
That is huge. But there is one more gap we need to talk about, and this one is technical, but it feels personal. The language gap.
This is so often overlooked, but it's a critical economic issue. Most global AI models, the big ones from Silicon Valley, are trained on English, Chinese, French. They are what we call token heavy for African languages.
Break that down for me. Token heavy. What does that mean for the person trying to use an app?
It's a cost issue. Large language models break words into chunks called tokens. English is very efficient. One word is usually one token. But because these models haven't seen much Zulu or Sesotho, they don't know the words. So they have to break a single Zulu word into maybe 5 or 6 tiny fragments to process it.
And since you pay for compute by the token.
Exactly. Asking a question in Zulu requires more processing power and therefore costs more money than asking the exact same question in English. It is a hidden tax on African languages.
That is wild. I never thought about the cost implication of the language itself. So how are they fixing that? Because I saw the name Masaken in the notes.
The Masaken Project is a grassroots NLP natural language processing initiative. And they aren't just translating. They're pushing to build foundational models for indigenous languages like Zulu, Swahili, and Yoruba.
So the AI actually thinks in Swahili.
Correct. It ensures that the culture is baked into the logic of the model, not just pasted on as a translation layer. It prevents cultural erasure, and critically, it makes the tools cheaper to run.
So we have the strategy, the players, the solutions. Now I want to look at the roadmap. The Center for Artificial Intelligence and Sustainable Development, CAISD, put out some strategic recommendations. If you are a policymaker listening to this in 2026, what's on your to-do list?
Okay, first big ticket item, sovereign clouds. We touched on data sovereignty, but CAISD is very specific here. They recommend migrating critical government data from foreign commercial clouds to regional sovereign clouds.
They call data a national sovereign asset.
Which it is. You need that data to build those local large language models we just talked about. You can't train a government service bot for your citizens if your government records are locked inside a proprietary server in Virginia.
Right. You need ownership to have utility. But you can own all the servers in the world. If you don't have the people to code them, it's just expensive metal.
That's the second pillar, the talent pipeline. There is a massive brain drain risk. The best engineers often leave for Europe or the US. So the target here is to train a minimum of 1,000 local data scientists and engineers.
And how do they keep them there? You can't just ban people from leaving.
No, you have to make it attractive to stay. So they're proposing tech visas for cross-border work within Africa, so talent can move freely between hubs like Cape Town and Nairobi, and significantly, startup grants.
Speaking of grants, let's talk money. Blended finance. This sounded like a really smart way to handle the risk of starting a tech company in a developing market.
It is. In Silicon Valley, venture capital works because investors throw money at 100 bad ideas, hoping one becomes a unicorn. In Southern Africa, capital is much tighter. The risk profile is just too high for traditional VC.
So the money stays on the sidelines.
Exactly. Blended finance fixes this. It uses development grants money from big institutions like the World Bank or the AU to take the first loss position. They de-risk the startup.
So if I have an idea for an AI that helps small-scale farmers, but I'm not going to make a profit for 3 years, this grant keeps me alive.
It keeps you alive. It allows tech-for-good solutions to survive the valley of death and eventually become profitable. It buys you time to innovate.
And finally, CAISD talks about ethics and safety. They mention these regulatory sandboxes.
Yes. A sandbox is just a safe place to test. Before you release an AI tool to the whole country, you test it in a controlled environment, the sandbox, to make sure it meets human rights standards and doesn't do anything dangerous.
It's like beta testing the laws alongside the tech itself.
Exactly. It allows innovation to happen without waiting 5 years for a law to be passed.
Okay, so let's zoom out. What does this all mean? We've covered a lot of ground here. We have South Africa building the factories, Mauritius guarding the oceans, Namibia turning water into hydrogen. It feels like a very coordinated effort.
It is. Southern Africa is effectively harmonizing its assets. You take the infrastructure of South Africa, the readiness of Mauritius, and the industrial focus of nations like Botswana, and you combine them to domesticate the AU's vision. They aren't just waiting for the future to arrive. They're building the furniture for it.
But there's always a but.
The so what here is that all of this hangs by a thread. And that thread is made of two things: energy and talent. If they cannot overcome the energy deficit, if the green power for compute projects don't scale, the servers go dark.
And the talent.
And if they can't train and retain those 1,000 data scientists, the servers just sit empty. Success is not guaranteed.
It's a high wire act. But here is where it gets really interesting for me. And I want to leave you, the listener, with this thought.
Go on.
We usually think of resilience as a backup plan, right? A generator is a backup for when the grid fails. But think about what Southern Africa is building. They are building AI that has to work when the power cuts out.
Right.
They are building AI that runs on cheap smartphones without internet. They are building AI that is hyper-efficient with data.
That's a very powerful point.
If they succeed, if they build vertical AI that is efficient enough to run off-grid and smart enough to work locally, are they actually building the most resilient AI models in the world?
It's very possible. In a world where energy is getting expensive everywhere and data privacy is becoming a nightmare everywhere, the rest of the world might eventually look at these constrained models and realize they are actually the superior design.
From model taker to model maker.
Yeah.
And maybe eventually model exporter.
So that would be the ultimate turn of the tide.
Something to think about next time you worry about your Wi-Fi signal dropping. Sovereignty isn't just about borders anymore. It's about your data, your power, and your code. Thanks for diving in with us.
Pleasure as always.
We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.